well, welcome once again to Talking Point. Today my guest is our Public Works Director, Scott Schatschneider, and we're going to talk about some of the projects that we have coming up in the city over the course of the construction season in 2016. Scott, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So what I wanted to talk about, it said that they have two seasons in Wisconsin, winter and construction, and we're almost done with winter. So I know that we've got a few projects planned, and I just wanted to kind of touch base and talk about what's involved in the projects and what those projects are.
Sure.
The first one I want to talk about is the one that's been on our minds for a dozen plus years, and that is finally the grade separation at Hoover and the railroad tracks. And the project as a whole encompasses more than that, including the improvements to the Coy intersection. So let's talk about what that project is going to entail.
Sure. As everyone knows, the Hoover Road grade separation project is a project that has been on everybody's mind for a long time. And that project basically is building a 4-lane road over the railroad tracks. That project is scheduled to start in the spring of 2017 and will last the entire construction season of 2017. We would expect construction to start in March and be done deer hunting weekend, which is typically the third weekend in November. So it will be a pretty big inconvenience for our community, but that project should help move traffic north and south on the east half of our community a lot better.
Right. I think once that grade separation is there and people know that they won't get stuck by a train, I think you're going to see a lot more people using that as a main north-south thoroughfare.
Correct. And it should help some of our response times with fire and EMS.
So give us an idea, I know that we've been working on this for a very long time, even before you were here, but give us an idea. I mean, it's more than just throwing together a plan and saying, okay, let's do this. There's a lot of different moving pieces. I mean, we had to deal with the railroad, which is governed by the federal government and the Department of Transportation. And tell me all the approvals and everybody who has their fingers in this project.
Boy, folks that are involved in this project, like you said, it ranges from the federal government and the railroad to the Department of Transportation to the DNR, to the Army Corps of Engineers, to other local municipalities, Portage County, the town of Hull, and the city of Stevens Point. So there are a number of folks that have to be in the loop, and there are a number of approvals and reports that have to get filed. That's why we hired an engineering firm to help us with it, because the amount of approvals, federal and state, that have to be that you have to get is just overwhelming for anyone that isn't in it every day.
Sure.
So it has been a process since, I believe I have correspondence from early 2000s regarding the city's concerns with the number of stops that folks had to have, trying to cross those tracks. So it's a project that is, from the locals, long overdue.
I agree, absolutely. And I used to work out at Skyward, so it was kind of a coin toss on where you'd get stopped by a train. So I think this is really going to be a benefit to everybody that lives or works or even has to pass through that area, especially for emergency vehicles. I know that's been an issue with our station too, because by the time they get to where they see if there's a train blocking the intersection, it's already too late, and now you've lost time and you have to go all the way around. So I think this is going to be good for emergency services, especially in that eastern part of the county. So because this project is going through, and I'm glad to see it's finally coming through in 2017, everything's scheduled, we have to make some other changes prior to that. We're going to be closing off Journs Drive. There's going to be some road closures through that 2017 construction season. One of the things that we're looking at doing is making some improvements to the Coy intersection, which will be the only way in and out of that industrial park out there. Talk about that and what we need to do there.
The Coy Drive intersection was a project that actually came up as part of our public informational meetings for the grade separation. We had held a handful of public informational meetings, and at every informational meeting, we had folks that asked us about the Coy Drive intersection. Are you going to fix that one as well? And after that project had kept coming up, we decided maybe we need to take a look at the Coy Drive intersection and see what we can do there. And as a result of folks bringing their concerns up, we analyzed the Coy Drive intersection, and we decided that maybe this is something that we should improve before the grade separation starts, because it will be the only way in and out of that industrial park.
Sure.
And that work is basically going to consist of realigning the intersection a little bit. So it's 90 degrees northbound, southbound, eastbound, and westbound,
Okay.
extending Coy to the west a little bit, and adding turn lanes for that intersection.
Okay. And when is that slated to hit?
That work will get done late summer and into the fall
Of this year?
of this year of 2016.
So people can expect delays and closures there.
Correct.
Now, because we're going to be working on that Coy intersection, we still have Journs Drive that people can get in and out of that business park from, because there's a lot of people that are employed there, a lot of people that need to get out and get services there. So we're going to have to reroute them into the business park while that construction is going on. But great, it's great to see these things moving along. Some of the other things that we're going to have on the table for this year is a reconstruction of 6th Avenue.
Correct.
Let's talk about that.
Sure. 6th Avenue is a street that's probably in one of our oldest parts of our community. There are underground utilities that are pushing that century mark. Mm-hmm. So the underground utilities are in need of replacement. And for the folks that live over there, I think everyone is aware of the pavement condition.
Yeah.
So 6th Avenue was a project that obviously has good value for us. And it's a project that will be done this year.
Okay.
We'll start at the Front Street intersection and go all the way to 2nd Street North.
Okay.
Basically, it's 2,500 feet, just shy of a half a mile. And that work should start in June of this year and be done in October. And what's unique there is we'll be adding sidewalk from 2nd down to Front. And we're also replacing the existing lighting with LED lighting. And that corridor should look really nice when we're done.
Good. And that's really one of the things that we do. I mean, periodically, we have a couple of projects every year where we prioritize reconstructions. That involves not only just the condition of the road surface, but everything that's underneath the road surface as well. So if there are older utilities, that bumps the road condition or road reconstruct up to a higher priority level. So we can try and get everything taken care of as efficiently as possible. And then when we look at the reconstruct, we're also looking at anything we can do to improve the corridor. So in this case, there's segments of property that don't have sidewalks. What we're looking at doing is standardizing that. Because it's a main east-west route and there's a school in the neighborhood, we want to make sure that pedestrian traffic is safe. So we're going to add sidewalks where there are none. That's going to be at the city's expense. And then the property owners will be responsible for maintenance just like everyone else is. The other thing is with the LED lighting, they're more efficient and actually have, in a lot of cases, better lighting. So we're looking at that as well. So when we've had several meetings regarding 6th Avenue, so we're past that process already. And when did you say construction was going to be starting again?
In June.
Okay. And what accommodations have we made regarding trash pickup and the residents being able to park in their driveway and things like that?
Good question. We will be sending letters letting residents know where they need to put their garbage to help with pickup. Garbage pickup will still occur. Recycling pickup will still occur. Typically what happens on a project like that is we'll ask the residents to put it in bags or wheel their carts to a certain location, and then we make special arrangements with our contractor or the streets crews to have pickup as normal.
Okay.
The days won't change, stuff like that. Things will move on accordingly. We also are splitting the project up into phases, so folks don't have long distances to walk to get to their residence. Before we'll split the project into halves, and before we can start the second phase, the first phase will have to be gravelled so folks can get in and out of their driveways to minimize that inconvenience as much as possible. There still will be some,
Sure,
but we try to minimize it as much as we can.
And I understand that. Now, I know we've had a lot of public meetings and they've been really well attended, but for those who may still have questions, what's the best way to contact someone to get answers on their questions?
You can send me an email, contact the Director of Public Works on our website, or my phone number is 715-346-1561. Any questions, please call.
Absolutely. So we've also got some intersection improvements that we're looking at. Some of them have been problematic for years. The one I'm talking about specifically is Franklin Street and Division.
Sure.
We've tried the one-way on Franklin Street and removing some of the distractions or perceived distractions. We haven't seen a terribly big improvement in that intersection. So what we're looking at doing now is putting in, and what do we call it?
They are called RRFBs, Rectangular Rapid Flash Beacons.
Not
It's a
rodents of
mouthful.
unusual size.
No, it's
I
a
don't believe they
mouthful.
exist. Sure, and what it is it's a pedestrian-activated light to inform motorists that this is indeed a crosswalk that you need to stop at for pedestrians. So it's just trying to make that intersection more visible and try and remind motorists that they need to stop for pedestrians in that intersection. Tell me when that's going to happen.
Actually, the hardware showed up this week.
Great.
And so now it's just for us to find time to put them together and to reach out to the manufacturer who's going to help us install them. We would like to have them installed before school lets out to kind of do some testing on them to see how they work and to see if there's any modifications that we need to do by the time UWSP lets out in May and by the time they come back in late August. Like you said, I think we're on to Plan D here and trying to figure out a way to help folks cross the road and for our vehicles to know that there are folks in the road.
That's really the biggest thing, is making people aware that they need to follow the rules, whether they're a bicyclist or a pedestrian or a motorist. There are rules, and if everybody followed the rules, we'd all get along much easier.
And I guess I'd like to take an opportunity to thank UWSP, who is being a financial partner in this. They've given us $8,000 towards the purchase of these signals, and it just shows the commitment that UWSP has to their students.
And I agree wholeheartedly. This has been a problem intersection for student traffic, predominantly student traffic, for years. And we've tried a couple of different things. Now, my goal is if this works as well as we hope it does, and we're going to test that first. We're not going to make any drastic changes, but test that first, and hopefully we can reopen up Franklin Street back to two-way to avoid the confusion that already exists there. And not only that, there's, I think, 20 different signs that people need to be aware of on that section of street. So good. So we're moving right along on there. And another one we're looking at doing for improvements is putting a turn arrow up at North Point and Division for the employees coming out of Century and the students coming out of Spash and Pacelli in that area. Let's talk about that one for a little bit.
Again, we have an intersection that if you've spent any time in Stevens Point, you know that intersection at certain times of the day is very busy. And with the high school being to the west and Century being to the east, that intersection experiences high volumes of eastbound and westbound traffic during certain times of the day. And we've decided that putting in left turn arrows would significantly help that congestion at that intersection. So once school lets out in June, we have a plan ready to go to install left turn arrows there. And it's just going to help reduce some of the rush of folks trying to beat that green.
Right.
And when folks are trying to rush through and beat that green, it gets pretty unsafe.
Sure. And this really comes after discussions with Century employees, the school district, and some of their users and employees as well. So I think that's going to be a great addition. When's that one scheduled to be installed?
Sometime in July.
July? Okay. And to give people an idea, I know I get calls all the time about, why can't you add a turn signaler, or why can't you put up, signal lights, things like that. It's not that easy. For example, this turn arrow, just adding a turn arrow to existing lights is going to cost about how much?
About $12,000 to $15,000.
And that's pretty significant. It's not something you can just go ahead and do in a weekend.
Correct. And something that seems as simple as adding a left turn arrow, there was traffic counts that needed to be taken. There was input that needed to be done into basically the computer for that intersection on how a left turn arrow affects all the other timings in all of the other directions. Unfortunately, it's not straightforward.
Right. And that's the point that I'm trying to stress here is that, things aren't as simple as just, say it, you should do this and it gets done. There's a lot of background work. We try and vet every possibility before we make a decision and make small steps so we can make those changes and ensure that the changes are actually doing something or having the desired effect before we move on to the next step. Which brings me to one other intersection that I want to talk about, and that is Centerpoint and Church Street by Shopko and the high rise. When Centerpoint was constructed, it was Highway 10. The traffic volume was expected to be significant, and we made it as big as it needed to be during that time. The changes that we've seen, now Highway 10 goes around the downtown area, so the traffic is significantly reduced. We have signals at Church and Centerpoint, and I know myself and I know a lot of other people that have sat at a red light with absolutely no one coming. So what we're looking at doing is making some changes there. The change that we're talking about is removing the intersection or removing the traffic signals at that intersection and putting up a stop sign on Church Street, allowing traffic on Centerpoint to flow. If nobody's coming on Church Street, then you can turn into traffic. Talk a little bit about that and what we did to determine whether or not that was warranted.
Sure. And this is another project where it's just not as simple as turning signals off. There was a lot of data that needed to be collected, a lot of traffic counts, and there's signal warrants that we have to go through to de-energize a signal. There's 8 warrants, basically protocols that have to be met in order to take a signal down. And we've been working on this since the first of the year. Mm-hmm. And we've submitted all of our data to DOT, and we've just heard back that they have given us the blessing to take those signals down. Centerpoint is still connecting highways, still State Highway 66. Mm-hmm. So DOT had a fair amount of say in if we could do this or not. So now that DOT has blessed this, we go through a 90-day protocol where the signals will go into a flash mode, and then after 30 days, we basically shut the signals off, and then we monitor the intersection for another 60 days. But even before we can do any of that, there's a fair amount of work that has to be done. We still need our approvals at the council level, and then we need to send out letters letting folks know what's going to be happening, particularly to the high-rise manor.
Right.
And then we have to put in some signage to let folks know that this intersection is under study. Even the stop signs that we have to put up at Church have to let folks know traffic from the right does not stop. So there's a lot of outreach that has to be done before we can even put those signals into flash, because it is a change at an intersection. And then we'll go through that process. We'll monitor the intersection, and that's where PD is going to get involved to make sure that we have folks that are behaving.
Right.
And then after that's done, we have to look at how folks are going to cross that intersection from a pedestrian standpoint.
Right. And I've actually got some questions and feedback on that already. I mean, as you know, high rises across the street, there are some elderly and some disabled people that live there. And, I see them crossing. We want to make sure that they're able to cross safely, which leads me to believe that we probably are going to need one of those pedestrian activated lights. And so I know that's in the plan to install as well, to ensure the safety of those pedestrians that really need to cross when they need to cross.
And that was part of our initial study, as part of those warrants, is we have to look at the pedestrian traffic. And then we also had to look at the signal at Main and the signal at Second, and we had to study they're called platoon gaps.
Okay.
The platoons being that group of cars that get the green, that are going westbound. What's the time in between those gaps?
Right.
And then we had to look at the pedestrians and how long is it going to take them to get across Centerpoint. And so all that had to be taken into account to make sure that folks are still going to be able to cross safely with that signal not being there. And we've met all that, and I think it's a perfect spot for some more RRFBs so folks can get across.
RRFBs. I'm going to have to remember that. I keep going back to The Princess Bride and the rodents of unusual size. It's trivia season, you can tell. Well, thank you very much. One of the things that I want to talk about with Centerpoint and Church, too, is that eventually, if all of this works out, what we want to do is reestablish an entry into that parking lot where High Rise and Farm Shed and Paradise Solutions currently are. Because as it stands right now, if you are driving down Centerpoint, by the time you see the buildings, you're a block away to the rear for your turn. So you have to go all the way around, and it gets confusing for people. So the eventual goal, at least from my standpoint, is that eventually we want to have an entrance into that parking lot so people can access the High Rise and Farm Shed and Paradise Solutions, because we're really starting to see some development down there, and hopefully that energy will drive some more people downtown. So I want to thank you, Scott. Is there anything that I forgot that you may want to add?
I think that's it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for joining us, and thank you, as always, if you have any questions about anything city-related. My email is mwiza@stevenspoint.com. My phone number here is 715-346-1570, and I look forward to hearing you. Thanks for joining us again on Talking Point.